Hi, I'm Chelsea of Friday Pattern Company, and I'm really excited today to be bringing you the first part of the Ilford Jacket sew along. This is going to be 3 videos all about sewing the Ilford Jacket that will hopefully get your confidence and inspiration up so that you want to make this cool jacket. It's a popular pattern for us, and because it's pretty easy to sew, and it is something that is endlessly customizable. You get 2 sleeve options, you get multiple body length options, and just a crap ton of pockets, so you can kind of like mix and match, do your own thing, put your own stank on it. And I really love that about this pattern because it's a collaboration between me and you, the person making the pattern, and that's always the best. So today we're going to be covering how to sew a placket. So even if you're not sewing the Ilford Jacket, but you have always wanted to try sewing a placket but have felt intimidated, this is a great video for you. And I'm going to link the placket, just a file download for the placket if you want. So even if you don't have the pattern, you can download the placket and just practice sewing with like scraps of fabric or put a placket onto something. Honestly, you can sew it onto wherever you want. You just have to have a couple matching snips. So yeah, I guess that's it. Like and subscribe if you want to stay around and do more sewing with us. Anyway, all right, bye. So here's the fabric we're going to use. This fabric has a clear right side and wrong side. If your fabric doesn't, you're going to want to mark which side is the wrong side and which side is the right side, because you'll need to keep track of that. Anyway, so we're going to lay out our placket piece, and I find it easiest to trace the piece rather than pin it and cut it, just because it's kind of a funny shape. So I'm just weighing it down, and I lined it up along that selvage line so that I have like one free line that I don't have to worry about tracing, and then just trace around the piece. Once you have it traced, you'll just cut out along that line, and I'm sorry that it's hard to see in this video, but I am just following the lines that I made with my little chalk pen. After that, you'll repeat that steps to cut a placket out of interfacing, and here I have that, and I'm laying it gluey side down on the wrong side of my placket, and then I'm just using another chunk of that same fabric as a pressing cloth, and I'm hitting it with a steamy iron to fuse the interfacing really well onto the placket. Here is the placket with the interfacing fused, and we're going to clip the notches now. So the placket has 3 notches, 1 at the top, 2 at the bottom, and we'll just grab our scissors and snip in about 1/4 inch at each. Next up, we want to transfer some marks onto the wrong side of our placket, and I'm using a marker here so that you can see it. You probably wouldn't want to do this with yours because it would leak through, but I just really want you to be able to see it on the screen. So this is one way that I do it. I just fold it back and then draw the lines down. If you have a different way that you prefer to mark these lines, then by all means, my guess. So anyway, just get those marked on there, and then you want to draw the top line as well. These will be a stitching guide for when we're sewing our placket. Here we are to press in the sides 1/4 inch. So we're back at our iron, just use a ruler or something to measure out 1/4 inch and press that under. Just double checking that there. And then also on this side. So just on the 2 sides, we're going to press those under. Next up, we'll match the 2 peaks, the kind of top of our placket, together by folding them and matching them wrong side or right sides together. And then we're just going to sew 1/4 inch from the top across this top thing. So up 1 peak and then back down the other side, keeping that 1/4 inch folded under. Here I have that sewn, and we are just going to clip this top thing off as close to the seam as possible without snipping through. And then we are going to just trim down this edge a tiny bit. Next up, we flip it right side out carefully, and then just use something pokey, not your scissors. I did it with scissors, and then I was like, this is setting a bad example. So use something pokey to actually push out those corners to get just a crisp turn. Once we have our peak looking pretty, we can grab our iron, and we're just going to press this flat. And then I decided that I wanted to poke at the corners a tiny bit more. Now we're going to join our placket to the sleeve. So here's my sleeve, and you can see this is the right side, this is the wrong side. And then there's two little notches down here. And getting your placket set up correctly on your sleeve is going to be crucial. So here we have the sleeve laid out, wrong side facing up. Grab your placket, and that is going to go right side down, and we're going to match those notches at the hem. So the notches match up, and the peak of the placket should be more towards the middle of the sleeve. So that's how you'll know it's right. So the shorter edge is matching closer to the side of the sleeve, and this is closer to the middle. The next step is going to be sewing along this box that we've drawn on here. So we're going to sew up one side, across the top, and then down the other side. I'm just going to put a couple pins on the placket to hold it in place, and I try to place them in areas where they're not going to be annoying when I'm going to sew this. So I'm just kind of setting them out on the sides. Here we are at the machine, so I'm just sewing right along those lines that I drew for myself, the exterior kind of rectangle line. So up to the top, and then pivot, and then over, and then pivot, and then all the way back down. Okay, so here is that sewn. You can see the little rectangle. The stitches are easier to see on the right side of the fabric. Anyway, so we're going to cut up this middle line, and I'm realizing that I forgot to draw the little Y that's on the placket that connects this line to those outer corners, but it's okay, we don't need it. So you just trim up, and then you snip in as close as possible to the seam that you just sewed without snipping into it. So you're gonna, if you need to get back in there and just get really close and just trim right in there, but you'll have this little Y, and then we'll flip it right side out. Now we're back at our iron, and we are going to flip this right side out. So we're pulling it through to the right side of our sleeve. And this is kind of an awkward thing, but just pull it through. And if it's doing weird puckering at the corners, it might mean that you need to trim in closer towards the corner of that rectangle that you sewed. But I'm just pressing this flat and then taking my iron and working my way around the placket. And when you're done, it'll look like this. Okay, so now we are going to pin this short edge in. So we'll fold it in so that our fold matches up with our seam line, and then we're just covering that seam line with the folded edge of the placket. So just putting a few pins in, and we'll pin all the way up to the top of this, and then we will edge stitch up this, and then pivot, and then across the top of the placket. So here we are at the machine, and I am just edge stitching 1/8 of an inch from that edge. And you can take this kind of slow, but yep, just work your way down it. And then when you get to the top of that rectangle of your placket, you're going to pivot and then sew across the top. Now we're going to fold in the tall side of our placket. So just like we did with the other one, this folded edge that we've created is going to match up, just covering that seam. So we're going to push that seam allowance in, so it's inside of our placket, and then we are just going to pin this in place. And this seam that we're about to do, we're going to sew up to that corner, and then we're going to sew up the peak and then down the peak, and then we're going to sew down that side and in. There's a little graphic that is helpful in your instructions, but make sure that once you're sewing up the top of the peak that you are catching the other side of your placket in it so that it's all sewn together in this step. And I'm going to show you this on the sewing machine. All right, here we are back in action on our sewing machine. So we're going to sew the other side of that placket. So starting at the bottom, we are going to edge stitch up the placket just like we did on the other side. So do. When you get to that top part, you'll just pivot, and then we're going to sew to the top of the peak. Now you're going to pivot and sew down the other side, but you want to make sure that the short side of your placket is tucked in underneath this side, because we want to catch that. So we're sewing down this other side of the peak, and then we're going to pivot again, and we're going to sew down just like a ½ inch on the placket. And then once you get there, you can pivot and you're just going to sew across. You want to make sure that you're catching that underneath placket in this so that it can be sewn all as one piece. Here is our finished placket. And I know that that last seam is like a little tricky, but I encourage you to just cut out an extra placket and practice, because you know, practice makes perfect. Or I guess in this situation, practice makes placket. Cool. So that is the placket. Next up in the Ilford Sew Along, the next video that will go live on this coming Friday, will be sewing the body of the Ilford. So we're going to go over step by step sewing the body, the front placket, and the collar. And then there's going to be a whole separate video that's just a pocket bonanza where we show you how to sew all the pockets. We're going to show you how you can get crazy with them. It's going to be a party, so look forward to that.